Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Nabil Ahmed, and I'm a machine learning engineer at Handshake. I'm accompanied today by the esteemed Kyle Gallatin, who is a TLM of ML Infra at Handshake. And we're excited today to talk to you about how we fixed the Handshake Feed, our brand new product, using LLM content tagging. So throughout all the exciting talks that we've had here at the Ray Summit, there's been a lot of discussion on deep technical subjects like RAY data pre-processing pipelines and optimizing GPU to GPU communication. But for our particular discussion today, we're going to take a more zoomed out and holistic view around how we incorporated LLMs into the development of a new product. The particular case study here being our Handshake Feed. After discussing this case study, we'll generalize a little bit, and Kyle will discuss how we established a very accessible LLM platform in-house for all of our developers to use and incorporate into all the new products that we develop. So put another way, temporarily, I am knighting all of you in this room as technical product managers. Congratulations on your new roles. And we're gonna explore this Handshake Feed and LLM platform together. So let's start by talking generally about the Handshake product and the feed, just so we have a baseline familiarity for everybody and the challenges that were incorporated in this. So Handshake, as a platform, for anyone that's not familiar, has one essential goal, which is to be the top career development platform for college and early career talent. That is our mission statement. Now, what this has meant historically is that the core of our product has been job search, meaning that we have early career talent that are looking for internships and maybe their first full-time role out of college. And we have employers who are seeking to fill their internship positions and early career full-time positions. However, as a natural extension of our mission, we've sought to move into being an early career professional social network. So you can think about other social networks that are out there, but we've got some particular aspects of ours that make it unique. The primary one of which is that we have what we call a three-sided marketplace, or three distinct types of users whom we are seeking to satisfy with our early career professional social network. The first is probably the most obvious and is the most numerous on the platform, which are the students. These are the early career professionals that are looking for job opportunities, they're looking for mentorship and guidance, and they're looking for opportunities to network on the platform. The second are the employers. They are looking for two things. One is the more direct transaction of finding candidates to fill their roles. But secondly, it's becoming increasingly important for employers when they're interacting with Gen Z to think about their talent brand and promote this brand with this new generation of talent that's out there. And then finally, the final stakeholder group, which is quite unique to us, is our educational partners. So these are the colleges and universities who the students attend. And what's quite interesting about Handshake is that the majority of our student users are not coming and creating accounts directly on Handshake. What's in fact happening is that we are contracting with the universities and they are onboarding all their students for us, as well as providing us very key data that we can use to personalize the experience for those students. So all three of these are very important stakeholders for us, and we need to meet all of their needs when it comes to developing any product, but in particular this Handshake Feed. So in an ideal world, the renderings, of course, always work out extremely well, and maybe it's a little bit hard to see on these smaller monitors, but I'll just talk through what the idealized feed might look like in terms of satisfying the needs of all of our stakeholders. So on our feed experience, we are going to have colleges be able to reach out to their students and alert them to events that are happening on campus, as well as resources they can use to grow their career. We can have employers, in this example, an alumni seeking to come back to their campus and engage with students who go to the school they formerly went to. And then finally, we might have students talking about their own experiences and sharing that with others on the platform. So all of this would come together in a really nice way in the ideal vision. But of course, this is a brand new product, and we're going to encounter a lot of challenges as we seek to scale it up. All right, so let's talk about this now from our kind of TPM of ML perspective. So we are creating this brand new feed product, and we're going to encounter a variety of cold start ML challenges. I'm going to put them into three buckets here, but these are kind of overlapping. Just trying to establish a general framework where we can conceptualize these problems. The first on our feed is that we need to have some understanding of the content itself, right? When an individual post is made, we want to know what is this post about, who the intended audience might be, what is the author seeking to achieve. And on an analogous platform like TikTok, this can be accomplished through something like the hashtag system. But of course, on Handshake, we don't have this hashtag system, right? So we want to solve this problem. We have an inkling of how we may want to solve it, but in the beginning, we don't have anything. The next, in a more zoomed out view, are content analytics. So if we aggregate all the content that's available across our platform, we want to think about, do we have a good distribution across topics, authors, and the intended audiences? So I'll provide one anecdote to kind of give some color to this. So particular institutions might be focused on subsets of the kind of academic landscape, right? Or the professional landscape. So you might have schools that don't have STEM programs, but are very focused in a field like nursing, or maybe focused in a field like creative writing. If our platform doesn't have good distribution of content there, and instead seems very focused on, let's say, computer science majors, then those institutions will come back to us and say, you're not meeting the needs of our students, and that relationship and their feelings about Handshake are going to deteriorate. The last thing is content relevance, right? So if we have even an understanding of the content, the final challenge is to have an understanding of the user who's perusing the feed and making sure we're matching the two of these together. So these are the 3 buckets of cold start ML challenges that we did not have solutions for right away, but we at least have them acknowledged as we seek to launch our feed product. All right, so we have a smaller group here, so we'll get a little bit of audience participation. So pretend you are now a Handshake user. The feed product is just launched. It's this brand new, exciting professional social network. What is the first thing you do? And anyone from Handshake is, of course, not allowed to answer this question. Make an account. Okay, provided you have an account and this is your first experience on the feed. So make an account, we assume, has been done. But right? That's potentially true. Yep. Look for people you know and seek to like create basically a follows or a friend system. Anything else? What does your first post look like? Given the profile has been made. But your first post, right? You're like, think about Facebook, right? Your Facebook account asks, like, tell me something about yourself. What do you put? Yeah, exactly, an introduction, right? The first thing that programmers did when we started coding was we said, hello world. And that's exactly what everyone started doing on Handshake. They all started posting their resumes. And this was a wall-to-wall deluge across our feed of posts that looked exactly like this one. Now, what's quite interesting, there's many things that are very interesting about this phenomenon. This is something that was quite unexpected to us. The first thing I'll say is, if you notice in this screenshot, is that this is not an image of someone's resume. In fact, we didn't even have image support when our feed product first launched because we were indexing more heavily on short-form video. But you should never doubt the ingenuity of 18 to 22-year-olds to do things that you don't expect. And in this case, what they did was screen record their resumes and use the short-form video app to share their resumes in this format. In fact, some of them shared whole CVs of like multiple pages. It was quite fascinating. But there's many things that are problematic about having this be the wall-to-wall type of post on our platform. The first thing is that it's just fundamentally a non-productive kind of post for all of our stakeholders. It's non-productive for students because it's not a good way to introduce yourself to each other. It's non-productive for employers because you're not going to recruit by looking through all of these posts individually in a very non-targeted way. And lastly, it's not productive for universities. They don't really have an understanding of what their students are seeking to achieve other than they want a job, which of course is obvious. You're on Handshake primarily to grow your career. There's other problems with this too. One of which is dealing with what we call personally identifiable information, or PII. Resumes are full of these, names, addresses, email addresses. And this can be troubling because although when you submit a resume to an employer, you have an intention there of sharing information with them, this is being shared with other students all across the country on the platform. And that may not be something that the authors took into account when they made this kind of post. So there's several challenges around these resume posts. And the fundamental message we got back from a lot of our users, but including our premium employers, was that this is not a great experience for us, right? We feel like we're not having this good distribution of content. It's not targeted. It's not relevant. And also for premium employer customers, there's a real discordance in the feed. Because if you have a very engaging post about some specific topic in the middle of a bunch of resume posts, it's not going to be even read most likely by a lot of the user base that's out there. So we're developing our product, we encounter this problem, and we want to solve it quickly, right? We're a startup that's seeking to scale and grow at a breakneck speed. So our initial idea is, let's use LLMs to identify these kind of posts and suppress them in some sort of intelligent way. And for the next part of this, we're going to outline what the solution will look like, but we'll just make an assumption right now that we have an in-house LLM platform available to us, right? So we'll have that assumption in place and sort of build around it. Okay, so let's talk about what this solution is going to look like, assuming that the LLM box has been checked already. And to start, we're going to start by developing a batch solution. We're going to start with batch for 2 reasons. Number 1 is because on the next slide we'll see streaming, and I just want to show the contrast. But number 2 is that considering the skill set of your team, you may see that batch solutions and batch orchestration is just more accessible to more developers and more, for example, data analysts who might not be as familiar with streaming solutions. So one of the objectives we have with our LLM platform is that we want to turn as many people as possible within our firm into AI developers. So having batch and streaming kind of in mind helps with that accessibility. Okay, so the first thing, let me actually step back for a second, is that we have the content creation process. So this part will be kind of real time in streaming, where content is created and we can do some basic feature extraction. Now, by feature extraction, you can start with something very simple, which is you just take the information of the content and put it into tabular format, logging things like what is the text of this content post, who is the author, what is the maybe university affiliation that they have, that kind of thing. But additionally, you can use certain APIs to do things like analyze a image and grab the text that's on screen, right? All that can happen in this initial content creation and feature extraction phase. Now, I promised you batch, and we will have an Airflow DAG here with the primary tasks all occurring in BigQuery as just different SQL queries, right, to maximize that accessibility piece I mentioned. In this portion, we will sync the data we obtained during feature extraction to our data warehouse. We will construct the prompts for something like identifying, is this a resume post or not a resume post? And then eventually we can process that LLM output into some useful format for downstream. Now, of course, what's missing here is the actual LLM inference piece, right? So let's put that box in place. And this is going to be an LLM job that we do through Ray. This is the real magic of it, with VLM as the way that we're serving our LLM in this case. Now, there's a bunch of things to be said here, but one of the most important ones is, as I mentioned, these resumes are full of PII. So we want to be very mindful of where this data is going and that we are adhering to all of our privacy agreements. So in this case, we want to make sure that this is an in-house solution and that the data fundamentally doesn't leave our kind of cloud firmament. All right, and then the last portion of this is that once we have this LLM inference job running and putting the data back into the data warehouse and it's gone through some processing, is that we eventually index it and make it available for our service to start using for ranking and recommendations. So in our particular case, we use Elasticsearch as our kind of index for content. And our feed service can access the different information available about the content from this index to decide how it wants to deal with these type of posts. So there we go, right? We've sketched out this diagram, and hopefully we can build something just like this to address very quickly the resume post problem. Now for streaming, it's going to look pretty similar. We're just going to translate things from the kind of the offline batch world to the real-time streaming world. And in particular, we change from using a Ray job that can be submitted as part of an Airflow DAG to a real-time LLM inference service that can be called from the Beam pipeline that's doing the rest of the process, including the feature extraction, prompt construction, processing the LLM output, and then finally streaming everything to our index in real time. We still, of course, have that constraint that we want our LLM inference to be in-house to make sure we're adhering to our privacy agreements. And I'll just skip to the end of the story here. Fundamentally, this is what we built, right? We were able to scale it very quickly using Ray, and it was able to be very effective. And I'm going to highlight this in these next two very exciting charts. So on the first chart, we can show that we were successful in suppressing the impressions that users were having with regards to these resume posts. So we were just making sure that their eyeballs were directed to other types of content that we deemed more productive and more healthy for the platform. But the second chart I find even more interesting because it proves one thing about humans, which is that we are a primate subspecies. We mimic what others do. So if others are creating a lot of resume posts, we make resume posts. If others are doing something else, we will do something else. And there was almost no lag to this. It was basically the same week that we launched this resume post suppression that we saw the change not just in where the eyeballs are going in impressions, but also the user behavior in terms of creating new content. So this is quite exciting because not just for this use case of resume post suppression, but for others around what we want to do in our feed content strategy, we realize that we can use LLM tagging and then changes to our recommendation algorithm to guide user behavior in ways that we deem productive and healthy for the platform. One of these is just a quick extension is content tagging in general. So I mentioned earlier that we don't have user-generated content hashtagging, and that's still a cultural piece of our product that we're seeking to develop. But in the meantime, we can kind of turbocharge this with LLM tagging and then do things like build these content collections or carousels where we collect particular short-form videos in this case and display them as the job search carousel. So this was hopefully a very fun introduction to the Handshake feed and how we were able to quickly solve challenges that we encountered with it using LLMs. I'm going to turn it over to Kyle now to talk more generally about how we platformize this and develop our in-house LLM platform.
Thank you so much. So I'll start with the real-time service that Nabil alluded to, using vLLM to deploy kind of like a generic LLM service for us internally. You've probably seen some version of this like 10 times so far at the conference, but Handshake, like many others here, are Anyscale customers. And so what we've done is we have a basic central like ML service repo where our ML practitioners commit code. And then we have CI/CD pipelines set up so that whenever code is committed, pipelines get triggered. We call Anyscale and have them create services. This fundamentally let us, like in a stupidly easy way, by copying one of the basic vLLM like tutorials, creating a generic vLLM deployment that we can use with like the OpenAI client for ChatGPT. So we can swap out backends easily and get all the same features and use the same code to call services like ChatGPT, but internally with the considerations of PII and resumes or for other use cases that are similar. But that wasn't all, right? We want like feed content tagging is one of like the many use cases that we have. And one of the many people internally that want to consume LLMs. So we have like data scientists, MLEs, analysts, engineers, leadership. All of them want to either use LLMs or consume data from these LLMs in a reusable way. We also have multiple use cases like content tagging. We use LLMs to look at a user profile and a job profile and see how qualified they might be for that job. We also use it for a lot of other internal data labeling use cases that we can then use to train classic supervised models on. And we have different LLM backends. There's not that many people here, so I assume no one from Google's here, but you'll notice a little frowny face on Gemini. But we basically wanted to serve all of these personas, all of these LLM use cases, and any configurable LLM backend that we wanted. And so we built a Python library pretty much. We called it PushButton LLM Evaluation. Apologize for the shape choice here. It's got like a real strong 2005 energy to it, but hopefully it's still somewhat legible. The idea here is that we just built a reusable Python library and Docker image with a super simple interface. It takes in entity IDs, like say a user ID and a job ID, and it takes in information about a prompt. So say like an OpenAI config with the model you want to call, the prompt you want to call it with, all that sort of stuff. And with that, it basically just stringifies a ton of OpenAI prompts or Anyscale prompts, and then sends them off in batch requests to either our internal Anyscale hosted LLMs or OpenAI. The best part about this is that we then can write it out to super queryable sources like BigQuery or Google Cloud Storage. And anyone can use this, from a data engineer in an Airflow DAG to a data scientist locally with Python code, or we built like a little Streamlit UI pretty much for folks to use it. And that's what this slide fundamentally shows here. Is like the flexibility of the interface means that any persona internally can use LLMs for any use case and materialize those results in a super consumable manner, which was the goal of this project for us. So on the left, we have just like Python APIs. The code is super small. If you take a picture and you have an iPhone 16, you might be able to see it. The second one is the code in an Airflow DAG, and the third one is like 10 lines of Streamlit code that let us show this to leadership or other folks internally, which is great. So conclusion, build both product and platform at the same time. We feel that the approach we take basically lets us scale both our products and all of the use cases that we have vertically at the same time that it lets us scale horizontally, increasing the number of LLM backends and the number of models that we support. And that plug and play approach that we kind of took to building that LLM tool helps us develop use cases, more rapidly and support more things in the long term. That is actually all we had. I'll do one last call out, which is that we're hiring. So apply yourself, tell your friends. I'm hiring an ML infra engineer for my team. There's a TLM position for Nabil's team, and we would love to have you. Definitely share these around. With that, I think we can probably move to questions. Please, if you have any questions, say them very, very loudly and very, very into the mic. What is your question? I can repeat it too. So the question is, do we use Anyscale to host all of our in-house models? Yes.
Yes, so we are actually a paid Anyscale customer. So we were using their kind of control plane as the place to deploy our in-house models. And I think you mentioned vLLM. So that was the framework within that service that we're using to host the model and do inference. So for this particular kind of LLM platform, we're thinking about the generative LLM use case, right? Where you have a text input as a prompt and text output generated by the LLM. So this particular service is not going to be hosting BERT models whose objective is production of embeddings, or XGBoost that might be doing something like classification, right? We're really focused here on the output of text data. But to your point, kind of outside of the feed, we do have Ray serve hosted models for things like generating BERT embeddings. It's just not particular for this like LLM platform.
And the question being, do we have like other models like XGBoost, BERT, and stuff that we host on this? And the answer to that straightforwardly is also just yes. Anyscale is kind of like the path of least resistance for us internally when it comes to deploying models. I joked the other day, but I deployed a try, simply like for entity recognition, because it's the easiest way for us to deploy Python microservices that are going to be ML powered at some point internally. Other questions? Rishi, hit me. Excellent question. So the question is, why did we do stuff in Beam when we could use Ray data?
This is a very good question. So I would say a couple of things. So one of these is institutional, right? If you think about the different teams and the expertise of those teams who are owning these pipelines, there's just familiarity internally and kind of the institutional knowledge with Beam versus Ray. Ray is relatively new, I guess like less than 1 year that we've been working with it on Handshake. And number two is that I think it depends sometimes on the particular feature extraction you might be doing, right? So within feature extraction, there are sometimes like cloud APIs we might want to use for things like processing images. It might make more sense and it might be quite easy to integrate within the initial Beam pipeline when content is being created and then onboarded, right? It's just a logical place for it to fit in. Now, theoretically, yes, we could re-architect pipelines and kind of move things around to have Ray take on more of the burden. But again, those trade-offs I think happen with is your team good at building, and then where logically, depending on the specifics of the task you're doing, should this task lie.
Other questions? Maybe a photo for Nabil's dad? Anybody?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think the good slide here might be the charts of content creation. Oh yeah, let me repeat the question. I apologize. So the question was, how does vLLM in this case change the student behavior regarding making these resume posts? And what I will say here is that this is a social trend, or a social phenomenon that occurred on this network. You have users, initial batch of users who log on, and the first thing they do is make this kind of resume style post. Then other users see that this is an acceptable behavior and encouraged behavior on this platform. They also start posting their resume, right? So our initial reaction is just to downrank these resume posts. So when you open the feed, the top of your feed is not just wall-to-wall posts that look like the screenshot I had earlier. Now, later on, we were going to think about maybe how we guide the content creation process. But what I really want to highlight with this slide is that we killed the two birds with one stone. And we were both able to redirect just the eyeballs of where the impressions are going by downranking the resume posts. But also, once the users no longer see those posts, it never comes into their head that this is what their first post should look like. And they instead make posts that are more productive, talking about things like, here's my summer internship, or here are some tips of how I crafted my resume. This is the type of behavior we want to encourage on the platform. Because fundamentally, just logging on and shooting a post out into the void saying, someone please hire me, here's my resume, is not getting students anywhere with regards to their career development.